When you first open a SvelteKit project, one folder quietly does a lot of work: routes. Every file that you create, a layout endpoint starts there. And understanding how that folder works is key to understanding the whole framework. In this video, I'm going to start building a small travel journal app. We're going to start listing some trips and then see how errors work, how layouts work, and every step of the way, we're going to learn how routing works in SvelteKit. So let's start that. What I have here is a single application that I started with Svelte CLI. So to begin with, we have to look at the routes folder, and I'm going to start by just creating a new folder here called trips. And then I'm going to create a new file named page.svelte. And then I need to start my dev server, and I'm using pnpm here. And just by doing that and then navigating to /trips, we see a blank page because I don't have anything in here. But if I just add a header here, say my trips, and let's just make it this text too, and font bold, and there you have it. I saved it, and now just because of that, we matched this route to this file, and that's it. I just created a route by creating a folder, trips, and a plus page.svelte. Inside of that folder, we're telling SvelteKit that this is a route that has a page. Let's make this page a little bit more interesting, and just by adding some markup in here. The error that you see here is because I am using TypeScript, and I need to tell SvelteKit that I am using TypeScript syntax, and that's due to this snippet here that has types. But this otherwise is just markup. I'm rendering a list here, and this list is just formatted this way. So we have New York, Paris, and Punta Cana here, and that's pretty much it, just markup. The point here is that this is a page, and it's matching the route based on the folder. Now we can have nested routes as well. So if I come here and I create a new folder, and I'm gonna name this new, and then I'm gonna add another file here, plus page.svelte. Now I can navigate to this page here. And again, it's a blank page, but I can create something in here. So create a new trip is a form button. Again, just markup. This markup is not doing anything. The point here is just to have a visual cue that we have a new route that is matching /trips/new as we're seeing here based on the folders and the files. Now, you may be wondering what a plus is. Plus is a special character that Svelte looks for in special file names. In a page, plus page, it means we have a page. In a layout, it's a layout file. So it's very evident by the name. We're going to see a couple of other examples later, but one plus in the file name is reserved. So if I try to create something named test.svelte like this, we're going to see an error here, and it's clear that the prefix plus is reserved. So I can delete this, and now we're back at the application working here. Point being, at this moment here, that we have a route that is nested, the new route, and the plus is reserved for some special files. Plus page, one that you saw, and plus layout, another one. Going back to the list of trips here, we can see that I have already, each one of the list items here is already a link. But if I click the links, I get a 404. That's because I don't have a route matching trips / something else here other than new, right? So if I want to match that, and I don't want to hard code for each one of the IDs, the way this works in SvelteKit is with route params, and we do that by creating a folder that has a name, the route param variable that we're using, within brackets. So if I add this ID here, and then I create a new page.svelte, now this is not a 404 anymore. Again, it's a blank page, but I can definitely show some HTML in here. What this is doing now is, again, is using the folders, so /trips/ID, and matching whatever we have in here to the variable ID. And you can see that by extracting this from page state. So if I look at page.params.id, I get this number here. If I switch to another route, oh, not photos because we don't have that just yet, but one is matching one. There's another way to do this as well, which is getting params from props. Works the same way, but you get the point. We can extract the params, the ID, and this here matches exactly what we're seeing in the name here. We can also have nested params. So let's say I am going to create a new photos folder within ID, and then within this one I add a photo ID to match some given photo ID, and then I'm going to add a page.svelte in there. And now what this does is this would match a route like this one here. Of course, again, blank page. If I add some more markup in here, I get the photo ID, which matches this second one here, because I named this folder photo ID, and params.id comes from the parent ID folder that came from here. One important thing is that these two folders have to have different names. If I were to name this one just ID like that, what it means is now I don't have access to photo ID anymore, and params.id is going to be the last ID from the route that we are matching here. And that's not what we want. We want to be able to access both IDs, but in order to do so, the folder names need to be different. All right, we have a couple of pages, we have some nested pages, we have route params. Now let's try and make this a little bit better to navigate. I'm going to come back here to the trips page. So this one, and to the top of the page, I'm going to add a header, a navigation header. And if I go back to that page, I can see that I have a header now here with all trips, and I can click and go to the new trip. But when I click on that, I don't see that header again. So one thing I can do is copy this and paste into the header here. And now I see that, right? But the thing is, now I am duplicating some code. Normally that's not good, right? So how can I avoid this? That's when layouts come into place. Think of a layout as a wrapper around your pages. It can have data, it can have markup, it can have some logic that is shared between the pages that are rendered within that layout. In our case, we're going to focus on markup for now, but the idea here is that I come to this layout in the root folder of routes, right? And I have this layout here because this is a application that was generated using the CLI. I can come up in here and paste in the same header. So now you see this duplicated, right? What I can do is I can come back to the new page and just remove this, save it, and again in the list of trips, the same thing. So now if I navigate between the two, I always see the header, and what is happening here is that the layout itself always gets rendered, this layout specifically, because it is in the routes root folder, and every single page gets rendered within this position here where we're rendering the children. So a children in this case is a page. The list of trips is a page rendered at this exact point, and all trips as well. So if I wanted to wrap this with something else here, so let's say I want to put in a div, and I'm going to say that this div has a background color of amber and a padding a px of, I don't know, 12. So there you go. I can do that, right? I'm not going to keep this, but you get the point. Just like routes, layouts can also be nested, and we can see this with a very simple example here. So within this ID folder, I'm going to create a new layout, and within this layout, I do need to render the children as well. Okay, so if I go back here, I'm seeing this doubled, trip ID 1 and trip 2 1. So this is coming from here, and this one is coming from there. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add a new page into the photo so we can quickly see this. So page.svelte, there you go. And I'm missing a $sign there. And in this page, what I'm going to do is first the trip details page. What I'm going to do is I'm going to first remove this header. I don't need it. It's coming from the layout. Then what I'm going to do is add a link within the page details to the photos. Okay. If I navigate to photos and back again, you can see that one, the header on the root layout is still there, and the header within the trip details is still here, right? So that means that we have nested routes. So this layout here renders when this children is called, and then this page here renders when this children is called here, and any other nested pages within this folder and downwards is always going to be rendered at this point here. And this is definitely the basics of layouts within SvelteKit. Now let's move forward a little bit. First, let's look at errors and how they are routed within SvelteKit. So let's start with just a route that do not exist. So if I come here and I say whoops or whoop, or as you saw there, or oops, we get this 404 here, right? It's a very bland error description. So what is happening here? Whenever SvelteKit catches an error, like a 404, it displays this error with the error code and a HTTP message error. We can definitely customize that. And one way to do this is coming here to the root folder in routes and create a new plus error.svelte. Again, another one of those special plus pages here. And this is just here to handle errors. Again, you saw this becomes blank because we don't have an error yet. Now we do. And this is not looking very nice. Let's make this look a little bit better just by saving this as a container. There you go. I probably didn't save this file before. Anyway, the point here is that, and most importantly, is that any error that happens in the application that is not handled or it happens at the router level, it gets displayed with this error.svelte file here. And this error.svelte file right now only has some markup to say that something went wrong and that we're sorry and nothing else, right? So it's a very generic, but it's a more beautiful error than the one we had by default. Normally, all unhandled errors are going to be caught and displayed with this page. And I say normally, there's an exception, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But first, what I want to show is talk about nested error files as well. So let's go back here to our trip details page and add a new file called pluspage.ts. And don't worry about too much what this file is doing. I'll talk about that in a second. But now what I want to do is generate an error here. So I have a loader and I'll talk about what this load function does in a second. But right now, all it's doing is throwing an error, a 500 error. And if I come here and add a new plus error.svelte file and add some markup to this, okay, this is a little bit different. You see the text is different here, and I'm displaying the error message that is coming, and this error message should match this message here, okay? Now, if I come back to all trips and click on New York, because this load is being called in the trip details, we're seeing an error. And the error that we're seeing is from this page that is within the trip details folder. Why is that? So when an error happens and we have an error page in nested folders, what SvelteKit is going to do is it's going to look for the closest error file to where the error happened. In this case, it was at the same error level. But if an error happened within photos or photo ID folders here, then this error page would also be the one displaying the error description or details for those errors. One caveat though, if I navigate to trip/id and a route that doesn't exist, like this, you're gonna see this error page again, not the one that we just created. And why is that? It's because this error here happened at the router level, meaning that this URL doesn't have any page that matches it. So SvelteKit defaults to displaying the error file that is at the root of the routes folder, if one exists. If it doesn't exist, it's going to display that one error that we saw in the beginning here. So let's just do this for a second there. This one here, right? Now, one more distinction that I want to make here. So let's go back to this, and something went wrong inside trips here. Okay, I'm going to switch this to not return a 500, but rather return a 404 and say that this was not found. Did you see that this changes from internal internal server error here that we're returning to now displaying not found? What is happening in this case is that SvelteKit only displays that root error file when the 404 happens at the router level. If it happens within a load function like this one here, then it is considered a data-based error. So it's an expected error that we can handle. And if there is an error page close to where the error happened, that page is going to be rendered. All right, we've seen how nested pages happen, we've seen layouts, and now we also saw how errors bubble up. That next piece is to see how we get data into the pages. And it all starts with this pluspage.ts file here. Right now, all it's doing is returning an error. Let's fix that. First off, I want to mention that I have this inside of this lib folder here, this data.ts file, and it is exporting a couple of types and an array of data. Okay, and I'm just doing that to simulate very simply how to get data from a database. It's not really a database, right? But you get the point. Now, what I'm gonna do is let's first come here to this all trips back here, and in the trips folder, I'm gonna add a new file named pluspage.ts, like we've seen before. And in here, I'm going to add some code here, and all it's doing is it's importing the data. It's simulating that it takes some time and returning this as strips. Now I need to change the markup here to display that data that is coming back from the load function, right? I need to import this data, and I'm gonna do that coming from the props. And just by doing that and saving the file, you can see that we have trips from loader. And this, at least for the purposes of this demo here, is the main goal of the pluspage.ts file, is to serve data to the markup, right? It does other things, and we're gonna see that later on in other videos. But for this purpose here, what I wanna actually make it very clear is that pluspage.ts by itself, it's not doing anything. It doesn't tell SvelteKit that there's a page to be rendered here. It is a companion to the pluspage.svelte file. So let me just change this quickly here and remove this. We're gonna see that we have an error, and it's a 404 again, because there is no page anymore. We need the pluspage.svelte, and its companion, the pluspage.ts here, is just there to serve the data. One other thing that you're gonna see with Svelte is that sometimes you see, instead of just pluspage.svelte, you're gonna see pluspage.server.ts. And in a way, they are very, very similar. You see that the page still works here, but there is a very important conceptual difference here. And we're gonna see this by looking at the network tab. So if I come here and I filter this by data and reload, you can see that that data.ts file that we are using here is being requested from the client. Now, if I switch this to pluspage.server.ts and we now reload the page, again, you can see that the data is coming here, but there is no data being requested in the client. The plus service suffix in the name of the file tells SvelteKit that this code can only be run on the server side, and then this data is passed down and server side rendered, never run in the client. Why is that? Well, in some cases you cannot access your database from the client. In other cases, you don't want to have logic in the client. So whenever you are asking yourself the question, does this code or can this code be run in the client? And the answer is no. Then you name this file with the plus server suffix. All right, let's move forward a little bit. And I'm gonna click on here. We still have that error file. The error being thrown in here. I'm gonna delete this file. We don't want an error here anymore. And now we can see the trip ID. We're still just displaying the ID here. What if I want to display the destination of this trip, right? Here's the thing. We're displaying the ID, and the ID is being displayed within the layout file, not this one here, actually this one. So here's where we're displaying this. We don't have access to the name via the params here. We only have access to the ID. So the way we do that, it could be through that page.ts file that we saw in the previous one here. But the thing is, the layout file executes before a page gets executed. So if the data is being returned from a page.ts here, let's try this. And trip data, this is the one here. All right, what is happening in here? Again, I'm just looking for the data in my data file, getting all the trips, finding the trip via the params ID here. If I don't find, return a 404, and if I do find, I return the trip, and the trip here is from the type trip, and it has the name of the trip. But, and I'm saying trip a lot, if I come here and try to take in the data from the props like we did before, and I'm gonna say that this is just a trip, and in here, look for data dot, I don't get autocomplete for anything. So I don't have that data. Why is that? Well, that is because, as I said, the layout gets executed before the page, so we don't have access to this. The solution to that is very simple. I just renamed this to layout.ts. And now, if I come back to my layout, I can access my trip and then the destination, and I can display this as I need it. The point here is that layout.ts is the companion to layout.svelte, much like page.ts is the companion to page.svelte. The goal here is to, in our case specifically, is to serve some data to the layout. Eventually you could do more than that, but for this demo, the purpose is to serve as a companion and serve data to the layout. Now, one thing that I want to mention is how cool Svelte is in terms of generating types and being type safe. As we are developing things here, so I created this load function here, and I know that there's a params here, and if I mouse over, there are types for this. And params knows that there's a param ID based on this ID folder, much like we knew that in here there's a params.photo ID and there's a params.id. And none of that I had to type manually. This is just SvelteKit running in the background and generating types. So within this SvelteKit folder here, you would find the generated types for all of that, which is pretty cool because one, it saves time. I don't need to keep typing this. Two, it's always consistent, right? I don't run the risk of having out of sync types because I'm returning a different data from this function here, and that data now I'm trying to access it from a template or a markup, and it doesn't exist anymore, right? So this is pretty cool. This is automatically, nothing needs to be done. All it needs is like the server needs to be running somewhere, and that's pretty much it. Now, so far, all that we've done is return some pages, but there's another thing that SvelteKit allows us to do is to return API routes. And that is actually pretty simple. All I'm gonna do here is create a new folder that is going to be API, and then I'm gonna have trips. And within trips, I'm gonna have another one of those plus files. It's plus server.ts. And the goal of the plus server.ts file is to export functions that are going to handle HTTP verbs. So for instance, in this case here, I'm going to get all the trips, and one more time, very similar. I'm getting the data from my data file. I am exporting a function named get to match the get verb from HTTP, getting the data and returning a JSON that comes from SvelteKit here. Now, if I navigate to API/trips, I get a JSON of my data. And in a similar way, if I try to add another one here to just return not page server, to just return a single trip, I can do the same. So this one, this is for all of them. Now let me get just a single trip. It may be a little bit hard to see, but I'm trying to find this trip here based on the params, which is another point to explain here. The same variables are available here. This is a HTTP event that is being triggered. and we have access to the params, much like for pages. So it matches this name of this folder here. And if I navigate to trip number 2 here, I'm getting New York, and it works just like pages. And that's pretty much it. All right, we cover a lot. We covered pages, layouts, API routes, errors, and so on. The important part here is to understand that SvelteKit matches the folder structure and files to the URL. And once you get that, you're flying with routing. In the next video, we're gonna get a little more in details of how to get data. So stay tuned for the next one. In the meantime, thanks for watching.